Look at any modern cruise ship and you'll see them. That long row of bright orange pods slung along the upper deck, hanging like beads on a necklace. They look reassuring. They look like there's one for everyone. There isn't. By international law, those pods only have to carry 75% of the people on board. The remaining 25% get inflatable rafts stuffed into white plastic canisters bolted to the deck. And that rule is not some leftover from the Titanic era. It's the law right now, written into the Modern Safety of Life at Sea Convention, which raises a question almost no one thinks to ask. After more than a century of disaster, inquiry, and reform, why do ships still legally sail without enough lifeboats? The first answer most people reach for is the famous one: Titanic. Reckless. Cut corners. Not enough boats. Except Titanic actually carried more lifeboats than the law demanded. The Board of Trade required 16 for a ship her size. She carried 20. The White Star Line went past the regulation, not under it. The problem wasn't that they broke the rules. The problem was the rules themselves. They were written in 1894, and they capped at vessels of 10,000 tons or more. Titanic was 46,000 tons, almost 5 times past the cap. And here's the strangest part. The regulation didn't count passengers. It counted tonnage. Build a bigger hull and you didn't need to add a single seat, which sounds insane until you realize what the rule writers actually believed a lifeboat was for. This is where the whole story bends. Ask yourself plainly, what is a lifeboat for? The intuitive answer, to save everyone if the ship sinks, is modern thinking. For most of maritime history, the lifeboat had a much humbler job. It was a ferry, a shuttle. Its purpose was to move people from a damaged ship to a rescue vessel that was already on the way. There was even a doctrine for it, spoken in those exact words at inquiries and in shipping offices. The ship is its own best lifeboat. The hull was the lifeboat. The watertight compartments were the lifeboat. The huge displacement that kept her afloat for hours instead of minutes was the lifeboat. And by 1912, one more piece had locked the doctrine in place: the Marconi wireless. A radio call could now reach across hundreds of miles of ocean. Help would come. The little wooden boats on the davits were just the taxi from one steel hull to another. It's a clean logic, even a reasonable one in the world it was built for. But it depended on a rescue ship actually arriving in time, and on the ship that was sinking behaving the way the engineers expected. So the obvious modern fix should be simple: just put a lifeboat seat under every passenger. Why not? Because the math gets ugly very fast. A ship can only launch lifeboats from one side at a time, because the moment it lists, the boats on the high side swing inward, and the boats on the low side scrape the hull. So if you want everyone covered, you don't need lifeboats for everyone. You need lifeboats for everyone on each side. Titanic, fully loaded, would have needed somewhere around 92 boats. 46 down the port rail, 46 down the starboard. Picture that deck. There's no promenade left, no view, no room to walk. You'd need davits and trained crews for every one of them, and a launching choreography no real disaster has the time for. Titanic's own designer, Alexander Carlisle, sketched 64 lifeboats into the original plans, and the number was cut. Partly because of the look, mostly because of something quieter and more dangerous. A lifeboat is heavy, and a lifeboat lives on the top deck. This is the part the regulations were actually trying to protect against. A ship in water floats like an upside-down pendulum. Weight low keeps it stable. Weight high tips it over. Engineers measure the margin with something called metacentric height. Basically, how far the ship can lean before it stops wanting to come back upright. Add tons of timber and steel to the top deck, and that margin shrinks. Try balancing a broomstick on your palm. Now tape a brick to the top of it. That's what Lifeboats for All does to a hull. This is exactly why cargo ships, which sit low in the water and carry only a small crew, were required to have boats for every man on board, while passenger liners with their tall superstructures were excused. The missing lifeboats weren't laziness. They were a stability trade-off, baked into the physics, which would make a tidy ending, except history wasn't done. After Titanic, of course, public outrage demanded lifeboats for everyone. In the United States, Congress passed the Lafayette-Siemens Act. Every passenger vessel had to carry capacity for at least 75% of the people on board. One of the ships that scrambled to comply was a Great Lakes excursion steamer called the SS Eastland. She was already a notoriously twitchy ship, narrow, tall, with a poorly balanced ballast system. To meet the new rule, she was retrofitted with extra lifeboats, 37 life rafts at roughly 1,100 pounds each, and life jackets for every passenger, roughly 10 to 14 extra tons, piled on her upper deck. Her metacentric height collapsed to about 4 inches. On the morning of July 24th, 1915, she was loading at a wharf on the Chicago River. She listed a little. The engineers fought her with ballast water. She listed harder, and then, in front of hundreds of horrified onlookers, she simply rolled over into 20 feet of water, 19 feet from the dock. 844 people died, more than the passenger death toll on the Titanic, killed in part by the lifeboats that were supposed to save them. So if you can't have too few, and you can't have too many, what's the right answer? Modern Solace lays it out with surgical precision. At least 37.5% lifeboat capacity on each side of the ship, 75% total in rigid boats, at least another 25% in inflatable life rafts stored in those white canisters, minimum 125% combined. That split, port and starboard, is the piece that looks wrong and is actually the most intelligent part of the rule. Because a sinking ship almost never sinks evenly. It lists, and Solace only requires lifeboats to be launchable up to a 20-degree list. Beyond that, the boats on one side become useless metal. You don't want 100% on each side. That's the Eastland again, too top-heavy. You want enough on each side that whichever way the ship leans, you can still get people off. In January 2012, the Costa Concordia struck rocks off the Italian coast and rolled past 20 degrees. Roughly half her lifeboats were unlaunchable. Only 3 of her 69 rafts deployed, and yet over 4,000 people were evacuated. The redundancy worked. So go back to that cruise ship, the orange pods, the white canisters beside them, the slightly uneven count that didn't quite add up to 100% of the passenger list. You're not looking at a shortfall. You're looking at a 110-year argument compressed into deck furniture. Enough boats to ferry, enough rafts to fill the gap. Split across both sides so a listing ship doesn't trap half the evacuation. Kept light enough not to roll the ship at the dock. The lifeboat was never meant to save you alone. It was meant to hand you off. To a rescue ship in the same shipping lane, to a raft riding low in the water, to a radio call that's already gone out. The strange-looking count on every modern hull is the quiet math of that handoff, which is the funny thing about most safety design. It looks like negligence right up until you understand what it's actually solving.